Rosh Koilo, Rabbi Rabanowitz, who was a good chaver, a good friend, learned together with the guest speaker tonight, Rabbi Uren Reich, to introduce him, and then afterwards he will give his talk. Rabbi Rabanowitz.
Ladies, just want to introduce to you the Choshve Talmid Chochem, Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Uren Reich. Many of you here in South Africa aren't familiar with him. I had the schus as a bacher over 30 years ago, Tofshin Mem Zayin, Tofshin Mem Ches, 1987, 1988, to learn Bechavrusa as a bacher with a younger man. He was the Rosh Chabura, filled with leadership. In our Chabura, we learned Be'iyun. And he comes from a family filled with leadership and organization. His Alter Zeder, Belezer Adler, was a person who...
I don't know where Rabbi Reich is. I mean, they confirmed everything. Can you maybe give him a call? Okay.
I'm sorry? Can you hear? Rabbi Isai, can you hear? Rabbi Orbach, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you. Yes. We hear you.
Okay, I just want to share that he comes from a family filled with organization and leadership. As Alter Zeder Eliezer Adler started the infancy of the Kehillah in Gateshead, and he came to Davin for his mother was an almana, he wanted to have a minyan, and he started off the whole Kehillah of Gateshead and built the yeshiva and the koil eventually. And he came and learned in America, and he was chosen to marry one of the children, one of the daughters, one of the four daughters of Reb Shneir and Reb Rishel Kotler. And it was kind of the mahalach from his youth and from his Torah of Amelus B'Torah. It is something that this oilam here in South Africa, for legitimate reasons, hasn't always been exposed to. The narrative of Avodas Hashem and the mahalach of finding solutions and the mahalach of Torah has many different aspects and facets of the diamond. Rabbi Aaron Kotler, as a Talmud in the Yeshiva of Lakewood, and my Rebbeim as a youth, we learned that Talmud Torah Be'iyun is the solution for practically all areas of Avodas Hashem. And Rabbi Uren took that and shared that with us as Bachrim and the younger light that were in the Koilo at the time. Later on, his daughter Chana Perel married my cousin, Sheni B'Shlishi, Yitzi Leif, and I know him to be a person filled with passion for Torah, Amelus B'Torah. He lives in the Beis Medrash of Torah, and his ashkafis are the authentic, pure mahalach of the Lakewood Yeshiva, Rabbi Aaron and Rabbi Shneir, and the Rabbi Rishel. And here, the community here in South Africa is fortunate on this day of Tisha B'Av, in this crisis of coronavirus, to be able to have, when our hearts are open and our neshamas are listening and yearning for authentic Dvar Hashem, the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to hear the words of the Chosheve Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Uren Reich.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Rubanovich, for that beautiful introduction, and very relevant for us in South Africa, because we're not zeichet to know Rabbi Reich. We trying to connect with him still. He's got some connection problems from Lakewood. We have contacted him, and he is about to join us. So maybe you can, Rabbi Rubanovich, carry on for a minute, for another few minutes until Rabbi Reich sorts out his connection problems. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the yeshiva he's at and about what he has accomplished for Klal Yisrael.
Well, I could share with you that I haven't had any contact with Rabbi Uren for over close to 33 years. And that which I do know is as the nature of the person himself. We learned the sugyas be'ion. We learned through Bab Matzia with Yekiva Eger, and everything about Rabbi Uren was commitment to Torah. I was in the process of dating my present wife at the time when I was learning with him. I was a bacher and he was a younger man, the Rosh Chabura. And all the questions and all the decisions that we discussed about with the right shidduch was how much is she going to be devoted and mussar to your Torah, to Torah in the future, what a wife should be, what a rebbetzin should be. And everything about a woman and everything about a younger man was shaped by that vision. It's a very singular, very focused approach towards all of our avodah, and I have no doubt that that strong passion. I remember coming to a Purim Suda, and everything. If I wanted to do something that wasn't exactly in the Mesorah, this is not how things are done. Everything was very, very clear, and it was a mahalach of clarity with fineness and derech eretz. And it was a person who I know would certainly lead Klal Yisrael in a forceful, clear direction towards Mashiach, but with the emphasis of living and involved in building up B'nai Torah, yeshivas, koilim, without any external contaminated ideas. So what I expect to hear now is an authentic, clear approach coming directly from as if it were to be without the way a Kehillah b'Yisrael should be. And it's going to be appropriate for us here to know at the time when we have the Tsaris and the Tzibor that has heard a different narrative, a different approach because of the circumstances where they came from. But to see how families that were raised with Torah see the future and see a mahalach for Klal Yisrael.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi Rubanovich. That's greatly appreciated. Rabbi Reich, thank you for joining us. It's a great honor to have you and to hear from you here in South Africa. Please go ahead and take us away.
Thank you very much for that warm and undeserved introduction, but nevertheless heartwarming. It takes restraint when speaking to such a wonderful community of so many brethren of mine seeking and yearning for connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It takes restraint not to give a warm greeting and welcome, but the halacha dictates that on Tisha B'Av I cannot do that, and therefore I'm going to suffice by beginning immediately with the topic that we're going to address, which is, of course, the day of Tisha B'Av, the eternal message of Tisha B'Av, and what Tisha B'Av has to teach us in our situation, very unique situation. I don't know exactly what's going on in South Africa, but the way of turbulence, especially in our times, is that it's global. And what's happening here is reflected there, and every country is a mirror of what goes on everywhere else to a certain extent. So I'm presuming that we share some of the unease of the times. And I'd like to address a Torah perspective on this, connected with Tisha B'Av. The prophet, the Navi, Yeshaya, Isaiah, which we read from this past Shabbos, bemoans this spiritual degeneration of Yerushalayim that was once the ultimate capital of spirituality and has now become recognized, unfortunately, as profoundly decadent. He talks about how Yerushalayim used to be a place filled with avodas Hashem, with korbanos, with sacrifices, and every activity was suffused with spirituality, and now rampant with idolatry, with immorality, and with murder. Eicha hoisa lezaina kiria ne'emona. How is a town that was once fiercely loyal to Hashem degenerated so that it is now akin to a faithless wife, betraying HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Mele'asi mishpat. The town used to be brimming with justice, with honesty. Tzedek yolenba. The concept of integrity was embedded in the walls of Yerushalayim. And now the Ata Meratzchim. And now all nefarious activities find their place in Yerushalayim, and the very town is conducive to murder. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Integrity, honesty, loyalty, that was the Yerushalayim of yesteryear. And the Yerushalayim of today, where people are afraid to walk in the street, they may be attacked by lawless members of society. It sounds eerie to us here today to hear these words uttered thousands of years ago. Our sages, Chazal, say something puzzling. On the words tzedek yolenba, integrity was embedded in Yerushalayim. Our sages seem to take this and give it a different meaning. Tzedek yolenba refers to the two korbanos tzibah that were brought every day. There are korbanos tzibah, communal sacrifices. Some are on Shabbos, some are on Yom Tov. But besides all of those, every day of the year without fail, regardless of circumstances, was marked by korban tomid. In the morning and in the evening, and in a deeper sense, encompassing all that took place in between. All the korbanos and the sacrifices, the thousands that were brought in the temple, in the Beis HaMikdash, were all sandwiched, so to speak, between the morning korban and the afternoon korban, a korban that was brought communally by the whole nation together. This korban, this sacrifice, the tomid, was extremely crucial to the spiritual upkeep of the nation, of the whole Jewish nation, and the beginning of Churban Beis HaMikdash, the beginning of the destruction of the temple, is marked by the fact that we lost the korban tomid on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, thus starting the path of the 3 weeks leading to the eventual destruction. And our sages say, Tzedek yolenba. It used to be that the korban tomid that was brought in the morning and in the afternoon had such a powerful impact. May olam loilon adam b'Yerushalayim b'chet b'yodei. Nobody went through a significant amount of time in Yerushalayim missing atonement for his sins. If he so wished and if he repented, atonement was nearby. Because if he sinned during the day, the evening tomid would atone. And if at night, the morning. And this is what the words tzedek yolenba mean. And what's puzzling about that is, how does that contrast with the end of the posuk? Tzedek yolenba, we used to bring 2 korbanos every day. The Ata Meratzchim, and now they've become murderers. Why is the murderers and the commonplace acts of murder, why are they the contrast for the Korban Talmud? My friends, I'd like to learn together with you a piece of Gemara that is extremely famous. There are many children in the world that can tell you the basic story of this Gemara. But like everything else that we find in the Talmud and in the Gemara, it behooves us as we get older to think deeper. And if we do so, and we talk a little bit about this story that the Gemara relates, the famous story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, I think we'll recognize that our sages are teaching us a profound lesson. The Gemara says, Akamsa uba Kamsa chorev Yerushalayim. The destruction of Yerushalayim, the way it actually took place, was a story that had to do with two people who had similar names, and through that, the story evolved. Ahu Gabra, there was a man, Derachme Kamsa, Ubaldvobe Ba Kamsa. There was a gentleman in Yerushalayim, it seems, who had a friend whose name was Kamsa, and had an enemy who he disliked intensely, as we'll see, called Ba Kamsa. They had similar names, and it was easy to confuse them. And therefore, when this man, whoever, this unnamed man, was making a big party, maybe it was a Sheva Brochus, maybe it was a Bar Mitzvah, maybe it was a Simon and a Masechta, who's to say? And he wanted a lot of his friends to come, and he told his worker, make sure that you have Kamsa on the list. Fellow wasn't so competent, and he made a mistake, and he sent a note to Bar Kamsa. Mr. So-and-so is inviting you to the party. And I'm inserting this a little bit, but it's plausible. Bar Kamsa says to himself, oh, I'm so happy. I don't even know what the fight was about. I was always uncomfortable with the way he viewed me as an enemy. And now it seems he's ready to put it all behind us, and we're going to become friends again. I'm looking forward to this get-together. Bar Kamsa comes to the meal. Maybe there's 100, 200, 300 people sitting there, who's to say? And the gentleman who's making this get-together, this party, graciously goes down the aisles with a drink in his hand, says l'chaim to this one, mazel tov to that one, greets everybody warmly, effusively, and then his face, his eyes fall upon Mr. Bar Kamsa. His countenance changes. His face darkens. And in a menacing voice, he says to him, what are you doing at my simcha? And Bar Kamsa realizes, whoa, this is a mistake. He starts sweating. It's very uncomfortable. And as the man is talking and staring at him, it seems to Bar Kamsa, truly or not, that everybody is going quiet and eyes are focused upon him. And he says, I'm so sorry, it must be a mistake. He says, why don't you leave? He says, let me stay, please. I'll pay for my plate. I'll pay completely for whatever I've eaten and whatever I'm going to eat. The man says, get out. Just leave. He's mortified. It's getting what seems to him deathly quiet. And he says, please, I'm not a wealthy man, but I'll pay you half of whatever this party costs if you'll just let me stay here and leave quietly at the end. The man looks at him unforgivingly. Get out, He says, please, sir, don't do this to me. I can't take the embarrassment. I can't take the humiliation. I will pay you for the whole cost of the party, the flowers, the food, the music, everything. Please, just let me stay here. The man says, I said, get out. It seems to him as though everyone's staring at him. The music is quieter. He stands up and scurries out, scarlet face, embarrassed and humiliated. And in his heart, he vows that the day will come when he'll take revenge, not just on the man, but on all the distinguished people that were sitting there. And in his mind, didn't take up his cause and allowed him this humiliation. And the second part of the story is that he finds some connection with the royal palace. And he goes there and he says that he has an urgent message for the emperor, that the Jews are rebelling. And he gives them, because he's so well acquainted with the halachic stratagems and how things work, he tells them, if you'll send a carbon, they won't accept it. And he makes it into a balmum. He makes a blemish that no one else can see, and triggers off a war that eventually destroys the Beis HaMikdash. That's the story that the Gemara relates to us. And when we see the Gemara at face value, it seems to us a straightforward recital of facts. Rabbi Sai, I would venture, my friends, to say that no one living at that time would have told the story this way. No one. It takes the perception and the depth of our great sages to see the story the way it's presented in our Gemara. There's a massive distinction between the first half of the story and the second half of the story. The second half of the story was national and international news. Some man, some Jew, probably heralded as a hero by Jew haters, considered a total lunatic and a nuisance by Jews, went to the king, said some kind of insinuation about the Jewish nation. A war ensued. Every detail was talked about in papers, in editorials, pundits, bloggers, for, against. There was nothing that wasn't talked about, discussed. The first half of the story is so obscure that we tend to forget that Chazal are pinpointing a small incident. I would conjecture that there were probably 10 or 15 parties that night within a few blocks of this story. A gentleman who was sitting at this party came home. His wife said, "What was it like tonight?" He discussed the music, the flowers, the food. Maybe he threw in, there was some kind of altercation for a moment. I don't know what it was, but I don't know, it was taken care of very quickly. It was so minor. It was such a minuscule detail. Very few people who see the end of the story would have realized that the root was in some incident. It could well be that Bar Kamsa himself didn't put the two together, didn't realize that a hatred had been born that night. He rationalized it with all kinds of other things. But our sages are saying, this is it. And what I believe the message to us all is, and it's very profound, very telling. When we are confronted by a person like Bar Kamsa, what's our initial reaction? Which Jew does a thing like that? Which rational, normal human being goes to the king and instigates a campaign of hatred against the whole nation, which he's a part of? We write him off as an aberration, as a lunatic, and not indicative of anything about the nation that he's part of. And what the sages are teaching us is that no, he went further than everyone else. But the concept and the repugnance that we all feel about what he did, we should really understand, is there in a microcosm in the beginning of the story also. The second part of the story is a blown up version of the first part. Let's understand the beginning of the story. The fellow is sitting, Kamsa is sitting, he's desperate to stay there. He makes 3 offers. I'll pay you for my plate, I'll pay you for half the party, I'll pay for the whole party. And then he stops. Why didn't he say, I'll pay you another $1,000, I'll pay you more, I'll pay you twice as much? The answer, my friends, is people sometimes have a rational reason for doing something. It may be faulty reasoning, but we can work within reason to understand what's driving them and negotiate. Sometimes certain things are non-negotiable. The first thing he said is, it's a mistake. I understand why you're upset. What am I adding to your party by being here? You're not happy to see me. Why should I be here? Leave. You don't want to pay for me. You know what? I'll pay. I'll take care of that problem. Just let me stay here. I'm not part of the party, and I'll pay for my own part, my own meal. The man says it's not good enough. So Kamsa says, I get it. I understand what you mean. You mean that I am diminishing the quality of your joy and you're enjoying the whole thing. So I'll go 50-50 with you. We find in the Gemara a concept of mazik v'nizik v'tashlumin. Sometimes a person goes 50-50. Okay. He says no. She says, okay, I get it. You're telling me the whole party is a waste because I'm here. I'll pay for the whole thing. Now let me stay here. When the man answered no, what Kamsa realized is there's no rhyme and no reason. I'm not negotiating with you. What is in it for me if you stay here? Nothing. You are an irritation. You are unpleasant. I will act towards you like a fly that I squat. You are agitating me. You are upsetting me. Your feelings, your psyche, your humiliation is totally irrelevant to me. I am only thinking about myself, and I see no reason why I should allow you to continue to stay here. Here in the USA, we have a phrase, it's not the American way. It's un-American. My friends, what the Gemara is teaching us is, this is un-Jewish in the extreme. The concept of absolutely not caring about how my action is affecting you, if I can get away with something, if I can achieve what I want, who cares how you feel, what impact I'm having on you? As long as I have the power to throw you out and there's nothing you can do about it, I'm okay with that. That is distinctly un-Jewish. And that is the root of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Because the Beis HaMikdash stands, the temple stands on a foundation of a philosophy which is the exact opposite of that philosophy. And now let's see the second part of the story. What does Kamsa do? He does the same thing. I will feel good if I go to the king. You can't do such a thing. It's not done. So what? It'll make me feel good. It may affect 1 million people, but who cares? I will feel good about it. I don't care about anybody else. It may be that most people would never cross that line. They would only go as far as the first half, but not the second half. But that's not a crucial distinction in reality. That's not the way the sages see it. The same abomination of Vakansa in the blown-up version took place in the first half on a much more miniature level. This is what Chazal are pointing out. Rashi says, we learned it in two weeks ago, that when a man kills someone else by mistake, he goes to the Ir Miklot. He goes to special towns designated. And what they really are in a spiritual sense is rehabilitation centers. It's true, he killed someone else by mistake. But how did it happen? How did it happen? Does it ever happen to a very responsible spiritual person that he should swing an axe and kill someone by mistake? It happens because the person doesn't view somebody else's life with sanctity. Life is about me. Everybody else is sucking up my space, my air, my oxygen. They're all a threat to me. I want to swing my axe and do whatever I can and do whatever I wish and hope that it doesn't affect other people. So we send him to a place, an Ir Miklot, a place where he's going to see Leviim, the tribe, the Shevet of Levi, is a whole tribe that's dedicated to living with a diametrically different philosophy. Selfless people who are here to serve and to elevate and to bring everybody to a higher level. And who's at the top of Shevet Levi? Among the Levites, there's Kohanim, there's priests. And among the Kohanim, there are higher level, lesser levels. And the highest is the Kohen Gadol. That's the highest of the pyramid of all these people who are engaged every day in being there to bring the world closer. Not just living for ourselves, but living for everybody else, and certainly not viewing other people as an obstruction and as a hindrance to our own success. And therefore, Rashi says, this man who killed by mistake and the Kohen Gadol, they live in different planets philosophically, and therefore he cannot live together with the Kohen Gadol. He has to be hidden from him until the Kohen Gadol dies. Tzedek Yolim Bo Va'ato Meratzchim. The Korban Tamid. What is the Korban Tamid? Every person wants to be successful. Every person wants to achieve. The Korban Tamid is not about my success as an individual. I cannot, great as I may be, achieve what this Korban can achieve except with everyone together. And it is this concept that is the exact opposite of the way the murderer thinks. When the Pasuk says, V'yato meratzchim, V'yato meratzchim means now we live in a world and a culture that is conducive to murder, because the way it looks at everybody is, you are a threat to me. Is this not prophetic and unfortunately pathetic when we describe the world that we live in? Old people with a diminished quality of life are taking up my space. How can we figure out a way to graciously cut short their life? God forbid. Unborn children. Meratzchim, a society that views life cheap, with a cheap attitude, and views other people as a threat. And the Kolben Talmud says, look how much we can achieve when we're together. Every Jew is part of this project, and without all of them together, it cannot happen. Yerushalayim lived with a constant awareness of my life being enhanced by everybody else's existence. Because only together with everybody else can I achieve what a Korban Sibur, what a communal sacrifice achieves. V'yato. And now we live in a nefarious society in which each person views everybody else as a threat. V'yato meratzchim. I'd like to share with you, Rabbi Say, a thought about David HaMelech, King David. David HaMelech lived a very painful life on a simple level. Throughout his life, he sang to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with happiness, but his life was not filled with honey. It was very difficult. From the moment he was born, he was mistakenly considered an illegitimate child and was shunned by his family. For many, many years, he wasn't part of the distinguished family of his real father, Yishai. One day, the great prophet Shmuel comes to town. He's here to anoint a king. Can you imagine? Everybody's agog with excitement. And Yishai sits at the front table together with Shmuel. And Shmuel tells Yishai, the great sage, one of your children is going to be the king. And as the Pasuk relates, they go through child after child. Nothing seems to be the right one. And then Shmuel says, do you have any other children? And Yishai says, there's another child who's part of the family, I guess, but he's not really my child. Bring him. Where is he? Oh, he wasn't even invited. He's outside. He's tending to the sheep. Bring him. And David HaMelech, his mother says to him, where are you going? And he tells her he got this message, and his mother knows this is a crucial moment. She says, I'm coming with you. Make sure you go with your Shabbos clothes. And as he walks in, the great prophet Shmuel gets a prophecy. Mashiach Hashem Omed, the anointed one of God, is standing, and you're sitting, and he jumps up to welcome David HaMelech. And everybody else jumps up also. It seems like a moment of relief. The pain of his existence till now is over. Immediately afterwards, he begins a new saga of Saul, King Saul, pursuing him. These are things that we don't understand necessarily with all their depth. And this goes on throughout his life, saga after saga, pain after pain, difficulty after difficulty. And there's one episode that the Pasuk talks about, which the Zohar HaKodesh says was the most painful thing that he went through in his life. If we were asked what would be the most difficult thing for us to accept if we had to live the life of David HaMelech, I think most of us would say to have a son like Avshalom push us out, an unfaithful son who pushes out his father and triggers a revolution against his own father, and his father has to run away. Unbearable. But the Zohar says, the Zohar HaKodesh says, as painful as that was, it doesn't come to another small incident in David HaMelech's life. As he was running away from Avshalom, a man met him called Shimi ben Gera. And if you look at the Pasuk, it doesn't seem like he was anything special. But when we go through what the sages say about him, he was the Gadol of the generation. He was the ultimate Torah scholar. And he was acknowledged as such. So you have the greatest Gadol, the Chafetz Chaim, running after a man in the street, screaming at him You are a murderer, you're a terrible person. That's what Shimi ben Gera did to David HaMelech. He screamed at David, say, Ish Hadomim, you're a man of blood, and he threw stones at him. And those people that were accompanying David HaMelech wanted to react and wanted to kill him. And David HaMelech said, say nothing, I'm not going to react. Elikim Oma Le Kalel. And Rashi says, in short, and the Zohar HaKodesh explains, David HaMelech understood that this is not typical behavior for Shimi ben Gera. Clearly, there's a message here from God. He was given an opportunity, Shimi ben Gera. He shouldn't have taken it, but that's his chesed. That's his choice. He was given an opportunity to give tremendous humiliation to King David, to David HaMelech, so as to atone for a story that David HaMelech, on his level, was being taken to task for. And David HaMelech said, if I mitigate, if I dilute, if I water down the pain, the emotional pain, the raw pain of hearing such insulting words, I'm not going to get the atonement I need. Let me accept it. How would we view a man who treats us the way Shimi ben Gera treated David HaMelech? The biggest obstruction to our success, the most hateful person in the world. Ironically, the Chofetz Chaim says that the coveted title that David HaMelech got, that he is one of the 4 legs of the chariot of the Shechina, Midalad Ragli Merkava, was achieved at that very moment when he was quiet and allowed Shimi ben Gera to humiliate him. And what that teaches us, my friends, is that this Shimi ben Gera did something for David HaMelech that he couldn't have achieved on his own. He gave him an opportunity for growth that nobody else could have given him. It took a man who is that distinguished to render that kind of humiliation for David HaMelech to grow to what he became. And that teaches us about everything in our life. Every other person that we see can be viewed as a challenge, can be viewed as someone who's in our way, someone to be pushed away, or he can be viewed as something to grow from. The more challenge, more growth. This is the Torah way. Not easy. But if Chazal, our sages, teach us that the sinas chinam displayed by the man who threw Bar Kamsa out lies at the root of the destruction of Yerushalayim, then we have to recognize that we have to stand aloof from the mode of operation that is so accepted in today's world. I want something. I'll be as obnoxious as I can until you have no choice but to do what I want. We live in a world where looting, destroying, screaming and shouting and ruining other people's lives is acceptable. That's my way of getting my goal. Have you ever stopped, if it is your way? Let's say you feel that you have to do it. Have you ever given a krecht? Have you ever felt bad for the store owner who built up over years his store that you just burned down? No, why should I? I have my agenda, let him do what he wants. That lawlessness is more than lawlessness. It's anarchy and it's complete selfishness. And we're all affected by it. And what we have to do is stand back and watch, not what Bar Kamsa did in Yerushalayim. That we all know we would never do a thing like that. But recognize that that's just 1,000 times magnified what the man did to Bar Kamsa in the first place. And that's why it was mirrored that way. And we have to start thinking to ourselves, how much do I view other people as a nuisance, as an irritation? and how much do we view them as a catalyst for our growth. Our Korban Tamid, our sacrifices, become ever so more meaningful when the people who are around us and in our orbit become part of our Avodas Hashem, our service of Hashem, in whichever way it may turn out. The Pasuk says in Vayechi, and with this I'll end, Shimon v'Levi achim, klei chomos mechei riseim. Yaakov Avinu, our great father, forefather, Yaakov, said about his two sons, Shimon and Levi, I know you had your reasons for raising down the town of Shechem, but I don't like the attitude of mowing down people who are standing in your way, of breaking icons just because they're in your way. Klei chomos mechei riseim. This is foreign to us. This is not the way we deal with other people. V'soidom al tovei nafshi, v'kolam al teichat kvedi. This is not my way, says Yaakov Avinu. Ki ba'apam hargu ish. You saw a whole town. You didn't think about each individual and how you're affecting them. They were all ka'ish echad. You just mowed down a whole town. Let us go in the way of David HaMelech. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. The spirit of David HaMelech, of recognition that the greatest enemy can really be a catalyst for growth. Instead of being a man who has no heart and without any compunction, just throws out his enemy despite the humiliation from a party. Let us be like David HaMelech, who comes to recognize that his greatest enemy is the catalyst for his greatest growth. Let us remember that the lesson of David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, and let us, in Yirtzeh Hashem, this Tisha B'Av should be the last Tisha B'Av that we spend in Golus, in exile, and let us be zeicher to the Binyan Beis HaMikdash speedily in our times. Thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Reich, for those magnificent Tisha B'Av messages. So much for us to think about and please God to inculcate in our own personal lives. A big Yasher Koyach. Thank you for being with us.